Welcome to my class picking guide for the Burning Crusade. The most common question I get over on Twitch is what class should I play? I have many years of experience to share with you today, speedrunning and parsing alongside some of the best players in the game. I will give you the perspective of a player walking through the Dark Portal for the very first time, as well as your seasoned veteran. I'll be highlighting the strengths and weaknesses of each class, their general playstyles, and what to expect from a rating perspective with a brief look into PvP. If you want more information regarding PvP, check out the videos I have linked down below. Earpugs is an incredibly versed player in 2v2s and can give you much more information and outlook on PvP than I can. Hopefully this video gives you a better idea on what class to pick. Most importantly, just play whatever class resonates with you, not only from a fantasy perspective, but what accomplishes both your PvE and PvP goals. Don't play something just because it's the best DPS, the best healer, or the best tank. Starting in no particular order, we have the Hunter, a ranged DPS pet class, which is one of the most fun and rewarding to play. A very solid choice in PvP, definitely not the standout class in the expansion, but still relatively good. They offer a more complex rotation compared to other classes, giving them a very high skill ceiling with the addition of melee weaving being a huge focus in TBC. You can also do a simple rotation without adding in melee weaving and still achieve similar numbers. Hunters excel at solo content with high mobility even while dealing damage. They also provide some nice utility with debuffs like Scorpion Sting. They also have excellent threat control with Feigned Death and their new spell, Misdirection. Misdirection, or MD, causes the threat of your next 3 attacks to be directed to any member you pick in your raid or party. Along with this, the multitude of traps makes them excellent for heroic dungeons. Some of their downsides will be that they have low consistent AoE damage, falling behind the AoE of other classes. You need to really micromanage your pet, especially if you're playing Beastmaster, and Hunters still have a dead zone, but it's significantly smaller at around 5 yards. Both BM and Survival have some insane burst damage and some of the highest single target in the game. If you want to just top the meters, Hunter is a great pick. Survival brings a unique buff with Exposed Weakness. This increases the attack power of all attackers against the target by 25% of the Hunter's agility. Some guilds will choose to funnel big agility items to their Survival to increase their raid's DPS even further. So if you want, maybe you can get some bonus loot prio and you could be your guild Survival Hunter. Next we have the Druid. No longer the jack of all trades, all 4 specs become very much viable. Resto Druid brings strong healing with Tree of Life and Life Bloom, as well as crowd control, especially useful in heroics. Balance bringing valuable utility with Moonkin Form, buffing the casters in your group, improved Fairy Fire, and of course Insect Swarm. Feral Druid, arguably one of the best tanks in the expansion, Mangle and Lacerate providing excellent threat generation, and they also do solid DPS whenever you aren't tanking. Not to mention the insane party buff with Leader of the Pack. Ideally always bringing 2 of them so you can have this buff for each melee group. And as for Feral DPS, they can prove to be very strong on shorter fights, but have a punishing rotation if you are to mess it up. All Druid rotations are pretty simple, but just requiring a bit of situational awareness. For PvP, Resto Druid is one of the most consistent healers in the arena. Cyclone is just too good. Feral is also pretty strong, so you have that as an option as well. With strong CC and other utility, they pair very well with most classes in TBC, especially in 2v2. Some of the downsides will be they have weaker damage compared to other classes, and they still do not have a normal resurrection spell. Something to keep in mind if you are to play a Druid is you will have a lot of personal responsibility to innervate or battle res whenever called for. Not a huge deal, but something to be aware of while playing the class. Overall, playing a Druid is a great pick. Next we have the Warlock. The Warlock is a caster DPS specializing in demonic pets, debuffs, and damage over time abilities. One of the top DPS classes throughout all phases, easily the most stackable class as they only scale and get stronger as the expansion progresses. Seed of Corruption is arguably the best AoE spell in TBC. It's such a blast using this in heroic dungeons. They also provide great utility with curses, summoning other players, health stones, and wipe prevention in the form of soul stones. They also have crowd control options with Fear and Banish. With high threat generation, Locks also receive Soul Shatter, reducing the threat of all enemies by 50% within 50 yards. Some of the downsides will be that they have a very simple rotation with a limited skill ceiling, applying the curse that you're assigned to, and then spamming Shadow Bolt or Incinerate. They're very reliant on Soul Shards, which can be tedious to farm as well as managing your inventory. They do have a more risky playstyle, using spells to consume their health for mana with Life Tap. You'll always bring 1 Affliction Lock as they bring a stronger Curse of Elements with Malediction. Affliction also provides Shadow's Embrace, reducing physical damage caused by 5%. Affliction has a lot of fun on multi-target encounters, as you can load up all the targets with your dots, and keeping track of them and which to refresh can be a very fun challenge. For PvP, SL Warlock is by far one of the most overpowered classes in Arena, pairing very well with many classes in 2v2 and 3v3. Overall, you can't go wrong with picking a Warlock in TBC. Next, we have my personal favorite class, the Mage. The Mage is a caster DPS with sustained AoE. They remain in high demand for both dungeons and raids, providing portals, food and water, and now with the addition of Ritual of Refreshment, making this much easier. Arcane is going to be the go-to DPS spec, with great single target and AoE, and a very simple rotation. Cast Arcane Blast until you need to regen your mana, and then cast Frostbolt to drop your debuff stacks. Arcane will be very competitive with their high burst cooldowns, now having Icy Veins allowing the Mage to reach one of the highest burst windows in the game. They could use Cold Snap to get a double Icy Veins and extend this burst window even longer. Keep in mind with the discussion of post-nerf raids potentially being the future of TBC, Arcane Mage would do even better with the fights being much shorter than ever before. Also, to clear up some misinformation, Fire is never going to be better than Arcane. It can yield solid DPS, but it's never going to be better than Arcane. You can play Fire in Phase 1 if your Warlocks are going to play the Incinerate build, but Arcane will consistently outperform Fire. And the other misconception is Mages need an entire raid group dedicated to the Mage. This is just not true. All you really need is a Shadow Priest in their group, and they will do great DPS. Mages gain a new ability with Spell Steal, and this will allow them to steal a magical ability from an enemy and use it as their own. Tons of raids and dungeons have a bunch of fun unique buffs you can steal and use to your advantage. This ability makes them the mandatory tank for certain fights in TBC. The Mage on High King Mulgar and the Mage on Illidari Council. They will both have a buff you can steal, reducing your magic damage taken by 75%, making the boss tankable. And for PvP, Mage is another incredible pick for the arena, one of the more higher skill ceilings to master, and in my opinion, it's one of the most satisfying things to play. Landing a perfect shatter combo with your water Ellie into an ice lance is just the best thing ever. Next we have the Paladin. All roles will be wanted in raids, fully prot and ret. You'll always want 3 Paladins, that way you can cover all the blessings necessary. Alongside that, the Pally has great utility with the variety of blessings. Just like Druids, expect to have a lot more personal responsibility when it comes to assignments for bopping certain targets or using freedom on your tanks. Starting off with Ret, they have a very rewarding and fun rotation with Seal Twisting. Ret brings the much needed 3% crit to the raid with improved Seal of the Crusader. They also boost the damage of their party by 2% with improved Sanctity Aura. A solid DPS all around the expansion. Most would say Prot Pally is the best tank in TBC, excelling at AoE tanking, making them the best tank for trash or any AoE boss encounter. They are without a doubt the best tank for heroics by far. And with so much utility and survivability, it's really hard to compare them to Druids or Warriors. No longer is the Mage going to be the AoE gold farming king. That title rightfully belongs to the Prot Pally. If you want to farm tons of gold, the Prot Pally farms are going to be insane, even with the AoE nerf. As for Holy, they can crank out some of the biggest single target heals in the game, perfect for tank healing. However, come late game, Holy isn't as strong as the other healers. Because of this, guilds will often swap their Holy Pally to playing Ret, so you can still cover all 3 Pally buffs. With melee scaling harder toward the end of the expansion, this is a great option. So who knows, you could have this cool opportunity if your guild allows it. As for PvP, Pally is always going to have a great time with all the control and CC that they have. Pairing very well with the Resto Shaman in 2s, you can legit 100 to 0 someone. With a nice Wind Fury proc accompanied by a Seal Twist, wings, and having the target hodged, this can be some quick bursty fun. Next we have the Warrior, an iconic classic in World of Warcraft, a melee DPS having Rage as their resource system. Before TBC, Warrior was one of, if not the most popular classes to play. Arms brings the much needed Blood Frenzy debuff, giving the raid 4% increased physical damage, giving them a permanent raid spot throughout the expansion. Even though this debuff is very good, you only need 1 warrior to keep the debuff applied to enemies, meaning this spot will be very competitive. Arms warriors are also somewhat forced into playing a 2-handed sword build because of their sword specialization talent. Arms can also play what's known as Kebab spec. Essentially, all you're doing is playing dual wield arms. This kind of plays more like a Fury Warrior, and early on in the expansion, it will do similar numbers if not better than the 2-handed arms build. As we get into BT and Hyjal, 2-handed arms will become the much more consistent spec. Of course, Warriors will provide the strong party buffs with Battle Shout or Commanding Shout. And as for Fury, the spec that everybody wants to play, your rotation is pretty similar to what you did in Vanilla. Great cleave, great single target, Very gear reliant, but still very strong in phase 1. Unfortunately, they offer very little to stand out versus others. You bring a ton of damage, but anything unique in terms of buffs or debuffs, the Arms Warrior can also bring. So typically you only ever bring one Fury Warrior, however it's going to be very viable to bring more than one in a speedrun environment because of how much damage they do on overall. Prot Warrior is the best mitigation tank in the game, perfect for any boss that dual wields like Prince Malchezaar. They have some cool unique abilities that can prove to be very useful, such as Intervene and Spell Reflect. They do lack threat compared to the Feral Druid or the Prot Pally, but nonetheless, they are still a solid tank throughout the expansion. As for PvP, Arms is very strong, pairing really well with Druids in 2s. They only get better as the expansion progresses, with more health and armor pen coming into the game. However, they can be a very RNG class, relying a lot of their damage to come from procs with Mace Stun and Sword Spec. Next we have the Shaman, arguably the strongest unique support buffs with the utility from totems. Grounding Totem, Tremor Totem, Earthbind Totem, the list goes on, and strong new abilities with Fire Elemental and Earth Elemental Totem. Exclusively providing the extremely powerful Heroism and Bloodlust, which is now raid-wide. Even with the buff being raid-wide, you will still want to bring 4 to 5 Shamans with how strong totems are. Resto Shaman has very strong AoE healing, with the addition of Earth Shield also being very powerful. And Resto Shamans will scale incredibly well throughout the expansion. Enhance gets some notable improvements, with dual wield allowing the Shaman to use 2 one-hander weapons, Shamanistic Rage providing that much needed mana regen, also providing Unleashed Rage, increasing the party member's melee attack power by 10%. In my opinion, I think that Enhance has to be one of the most valuable classes in the raid. With Totem Twisting being an essential part of their rotation, I think this makes them much more desirable than any other class. Elemental has some insane bursts and can be very strong early on. However, Elemental doesn't scale that well, but it is a sought after spec, with their Totem of Wrath giving caster DPS additional hit rating. You'll always want one Elemental in your raid for this alone. Proving to be very strong in phase 1, especially in Karazhan, just expect Elemental to not scale as hard as other classes. Some of the downsides for the Shaman will be they are generally lower DPS than non-hybrid classes, especially in later phases. Elemental and Resto are largely reliant on casted spells with limited mobility. And lastly, for PvP, Enhance and LA do great damage, but their utility is very lackluster and most other comps have an easy time countering you. If you get tunneled, you aren't doing anything. You don't have a lot of other CC that helps you alleviate this pressure, and so you are going to have a more difficult time than other classes. Resto Shaman is going to be your go-to pick for the arena. By no means, Shaman is not a bad pick in PvP, but you are going to have a harder time compared to other classes. Next we have the Rogue, getting the short end of the stick when it comes to raiding in the Burning Crusade. The damage is mediocre and unfortunately only have one spec to play when it comes to raiding. There's an argument to bring Subtlety for the Hemo debuff, but with low damage output, it usually doesn't result in being a raid DPS gain. As for Assassination or Mutilate, there isn't a ton of daggers in the expansion to really utilize the spec, leaving us with Combat. However, Rogues do bring the best armor debuff in the game with Exposed Armor. Because of this, you will typically bring at least one Rogue to your raids. They are very gear dependent with very little AoE, so it's hard for them to compete on overall damage. However, if Rogues do get gear, they are very capable of dealing burst damage. Using Blade Flurry, Adrenaline Rush, and replenishing their energy with Thistle Tea, they can do a huge amount of damage over a short period of time. And with the discussion of post-nerf fights being the future of TBC, Rogue could see a nice jump in their DPS if the fights are much shorter than before. It's also very nice to have a Rogue in your heroics for that much needed CC. While they aren't the best in raids, Rogues are by far the best class in PvP, with a plethora of defensive and utility, including Evasion, Vanish, and their all-new ability, Cloak of Shadows. They also have insane mobility with Sprint and another new ability, Shadow Step. With all this in mind, they can heavily dictate how the arena match will go based off of the Rogue's playstyle. An absolute incredible pick for PvP. Last up we have the Priest, highly desirable in any group content. Great healing output, especially as Holy with Circle of Healing. Great utility with Mass Dispel. Disc is also very strong, bringing along Pain Suppression and Power Infusion. Strong in PvP as Discipline in Season 1, pretty much can pair up with anything in 2s and they will do very good. They get the brand new Shadow Fiend ability, so now mana issues are nowhere near as crippling as they were in Classic. As for Shadow Priest, they will do solid DPS. They will struggle on AoE packs, not having Mind Seer or any big AoE ability, so they'll have to rely on multi-dotting. But they simply just bring the most utility from one specialization alone. Vampiric Embrace acting as an additional healer will go a very long way, especially in later phases of the game. The much needed Misery debuff and Shadow Weaving to beef up your casters even more. And most importantly, Vampiric Touch. If there was a single reason to bring a Shadow Priest to the raid, this is it. Regenerating the mana of your party, making it essential to bring at least one of them to your raids. Being the mana battery allows your healers to just pump out so much more HPS without having to really think about their mana bars. It wasn't uncommon to see guilds running 2 of these in Sunwell with how demanding the healing output was. And that's everything for my class picking guide for TBC. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me over on Twitch. I'll be streaming a bunch come pre-patch, leveling up my Paladin. And if I did miss anything, please leave those in the comments down below. As always, be sure to like and subscribe for more videos just like this one, and I will see you next time.